Well, hello. I don't know if a line will be appearing. I guess I just assumed it would go ahead, and although I have emailed him with the link and everything, he may not be coming because it was, I guess, short notice, and we didn't say. Uh, well, I didn't, so he may not turn up. But even if he doesn't, I have things to say to you. What have I got to report on the polemics front? Well, it's always theology, isn't it? I'm saying theology is the final frontier of political discourse. Words like idolatry mean a lot if you take the whole thing seriously. What Lionel said to me last week was that I should let Christians be Christian because it's all too much for them. And I'm saying you really have to tackle the problem, grasp the nettle, take the bull by the horns and wrestle it to the ground, or you're just tinkering at the edges and not solving the problem, putting a plaster over a chasm and wasting your time. You might as well not bother. And last night, in a space, I was really making the point to these Muslims who were, being nice to these Christians. And I thought, just give it to them, just tell them that it's idolatry, and then leave it to them to decide whether they care that it's idolatry, and if they don't agree that it's idolatry, come up with arguments about why it's not. Right? That's the only thing to do. It's the quickest way, or these Muslims are in fact causing, directly or indirectly, the Garsons to suffer. So Muslims, if they have a conscience at all, need to understand that they have been disobeying the commandment in chapter 18, verse 4 of the Quran that commands them to admonish those who claim that God has begotten a son. And they're not doing it. That should be, the first point that any Muslim makes to any Christian. Otherwise, they'll be talking about the fucking Septuagint. I mean, what the hell? I don't even know what that's about. I don't even know, and I do not even care. Speaking of which, I will look it up. It's one of those things that I keep looking up and then instantly forget because it's so irrelevant to what I'm trying to do. So what's a Septuagint? So it's the Greek Old Testament. So it's a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible from the original biblical Hebrew. Okay, I can remember that. So it's not, why read it in Greek when you can read it in Hebrew, hey? So just ignore it, right? It's not even in the original language. So why do people read the Septuagint? Apparently it means in Latin. Septuagint is derived from the Latin phrase Vetus Testamentum ex versione Septuaginta interpretum, the Old Testament from the version of the 70 translators. Yeah, so what? 70 translators? that means it's going to be inaccurate. I mean, if you're going to say that um, you're going to you're going to believe the whole story of the Torah being handed to Moses on Mount Sinai, you would want to read it in the original language, which is Hebrew, right? You're not going to. Why would you care about this version translated by 70 translators? It's just retarded. I just can't stand it. You know, when these Muslims pussyfoot around and don't want to hurt the feelings of these Christians who obviously believe in nonsense. Anything they say in defense of the Trinity can be blown away like a house of cards. But still, these Muslims pussyfoot around, talking to these Christians who well, they only call themselves Christian. They don't believe, because if they did believe, they would worry about being sent to hell. But since they don't, they're just hypocrites and nihilists who pretend to be Christian to show how much they hate Muslims, right? They're basically saying, we hate your religion so much, we would rather pretend to believe in nonsense and go to hell and die and do it again and again and again to show how much we hate you. That is basically what these Christo morons are saying to Muslims, and they keep sucking it up because, well, they're just going to be nice to these people who hate them, right? And the only thing these people respect is, well, strength and power. Money and power. It's the only things these moral retards respect. So why would any Muslim talking to any Christian even deign to talk about the Septuagint? So it's already an impure form, right? So if you really care about the directly revealed word of God, go to the original Hebrew version and read it and get any guidance from any Hebrew reading, Hebrew speaking person, not some Greek, right? Not some idolatrous Greek. So no, I won't be respecting the views of these Christo morals who just can't take it. I get it that don't want to accept that their ancestors have been lying to themselves since the 4th century. I think it should be pointed out as soon as possible that believing in nonsense, pretending to believe in nonsense, is going to harm all these people dying Christians and going to hell, right? If if idolatry and blasphemy are mortal sins, then anyone who dies Christian, if he commits no other sin, goes to hell. If you take the whole thing seriously, which possibly you don't. And if you don't, then you're probably a hypocrite, right? You're a hypocrite who doesn't take God literally, his laws literally, the afterlife literally. It's all lies and stories, and it doesn't matter which one you pretend to believe in because they're all lies and stories. And oh, well, just let them go their own way. It's too much trouble. And in the meantime, government goes from bad to worse, more atheists and nihilists joining the ruling classes, and I guess these people will be happy blaming Jews. No, Jews. Are Jews their own worst enemy? I would say so, because they don't take it literally either. Well, I think ironically, I, an agnostic, am the one who is closest to taking the whole thing literally. So there you have Lionel saying, just leave them, let them just, do their thing, because it's too much for them to make the transition from Christianity to Islam. Why? Why leave them alone when they are the author of their own misfortune? Every day they whinge about their government, blame the Jews, and the Jews, because they don't take the thing literally either, suffer to be blamed by Gentiles. Because if Jews took the whole thing literally, they would become Muslim, right? They would become Muslim because they're supposed to believe in an afterlife. How are they going to get an afterlife without God making it possible, making it being the one to judge them for their ability to pass the exam to gain admission to heaven? Who is going to judge everything and everyone? So obviously, if you're going to believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished, as the 13 principles of Judaism require you to, then you would logically and necessarily have to believe in God. I'll have to retitle this to Theology and Idolatry. Which I've done now. So, if Jews took it literally, they would convert to Islam, because Judaism does not have scripture from God that mentions the afterlife. And that was why, in the time of Jesus, the Sadducees and the Pharisees basically had a culture war with each other. The Pharisees said, of course, you have to believe in God. And the Sadducees kept asking, where the hell in the Torah does it mention any afterlife? Where the priesthood, the control, the worship of God, were top dog, and the Pharisees are the common people trying to rely on the rules. And they don't really matter because there is no afterlife, said the Sadducees. So if you don't believe me, well, look it up. The Sadducees were atheists, and they are extinct. So that would suggest that they were wrong. The Pharisees have descendants in the form of the rabbis of today. So they probably got a few things right, even if they did not get everything right. And of course, believing in the afterlife means that you are an optimist and you believe that good will be rewarded and evil punished in this life or the next. This attitude helps you deal with life without suffering from mental illness and depression and the desire to kill yourself. And so you as a society will do better and survive longer than for societies who are atheist and nihilist, who do not see the point in believing in the afterlife. But after so many centuries of human history, you would have thought the penny would drop by now, that whether or not the afterlife exists, whether reincarnation actually takes place, belief in it has prolonged these civilizations whose rulers claim to believe in it. and you have to credit the European where the credit is due for his exploration and imperialism in civilizing the world where civilization did not exist. We are the beneficiaries of it in that we live in a world of easy transport and easy communication. And even if we do not care much for Western imperialism, we use many of the benefits of a globalized world in terms of communications and transport. But back to these Christo-morons who can't get over it. Yes, I'm not saying be mean to them the whole time, but really they have to understand that, or they have to acknowledge that they have been traumatized. Well, imagine you being force-fed lies for your entire life, lies that are absurd to everyone else outside your religious group. You were forced to believe that an executed blasphemer created the universe. That was what all these generations of Christians were supposed to believe in since the 4th century. And it's only by just not thinking too much of it and accepting that, it's one of the mysteries of God and the mystery of the Trinity. You're not supposed to ask too many questions, and you get on with your life and you obey the law of the land, then you'll probably do okay. And occasionally pray to God or Jesus, whichever you prefer. Nobody will really know who you pray to in your mind when you do pray. So being force-fed to believe in absurdities will have an effect on your mind, won't it? Of course it will. You'll feel stupid, you'll feel angry, you'll feel resentment, and you'll want to blame somebody. And a lot of these Christians blame Jews because, in a way, Jews appear to be responsible for all the horrors of Christianity and all the horrors of Islam. And a lot of these Christo-morons with their anthropomorphism, which I keep telling them is idolatry. If you think that God is a man and a Jew and Jesus, you are guilty of anthropomorphism and therefore guilty of idolatry. And the thing is, all these ideas swim around in their minds, and I don't think they even understand. Perhaps they think they understand, but they don't really care, because if they really cared, these statements I make would concern them. But they don't care. They just swim around in this swamp of confusion and appear to be happy to do so as long as they can blame Jews and Muslims for everything that has gone wrong with their government. So the only way to straighten out their minds is to explain to them what they really should be believing in. And if they had believed in it, and if their ancestors had believed in it, they wouldn't have any of the problems that they have now. So if Jews really believed that good will be rewarded and evil punished, then they would have martyred themselves and say to the Inquisition, "Do your worst. Even if you kill me, I will go to a better place." Well, you, Christian, will go to hell for believing in absurdities and practicing your idolatry. They could have said that, but they didn't, because well, you can forgive them for wanting to live and not being expelled again. But the consequence of them not really giving Christians a piece of their mind is that Christians were spread their error all around the world. And now they do not have an excuse because of the First Amendment. So in America, there are no laws against idolatry and blasphemy. And since the European Convention of Human Rights in, I think, 1955, nobody can be the idolatry and blasphemy are not crimes because there's freedom of belief under Article 10 of the European Convention of Human Rights. Although there are certain things that cannot be said, such as Holocaust denial, which nobody wants to talk about for obvious reasons. So there are things sacred to the European, and this is the Holocaust. But if you look at a list of things that we're allowed to say and the list of things we're not allowed to say, it becomes clear whose interests it serves. Many people will say it serves the interests of the Jews, but I don't see how. If you think of Jews as being really just the mascot of the American Empire, then and Israel as a Western colonial outpost, then I think as a Jew, you would not feel that you're being well treated. You feel like somebody has culturally appropriated your scripture, used your brand to promote their foreign policy, and when Western foreign policy provokes anger and hatred, the Jews get it in the neck. They're always blamed. So I wouldn't feel that high and mighty if I were a Jew. I would feel used and abused, even by the people who claim to protect my feelings against being offended by people who want to deny the Holocaust or challenge Zionism. But what I've noticed is that for people who don't believe in God, they wouldn't even notice that they have been cursed by God, right? So is that a good thing or not a good thing? Well, it depends on, I suppose, whether it is true that they have indeed been cursed by God. Of course, I can't possibly know, and I'm only an agnostic. But if you did believe in God and bad stuff happened to you, you think, what's wrong? Is this divine punishment? Because that's what you're supposed to think if you buy into the Abrahamic moral system. You're supposed to believe in divine punishment. And the 11th principle of Judaism requires you to believe in divine punishment. And Muslims are also required to believe in divine punishment, and so are Christians. So, but if you don't really believe, or if you just say you believe, but you're really lying to everyone, including yourself, then it won't have much effect on your behavior. You'll just be, talking the same old nonsense, but not believing in it, and chanting it like a mantra without understanding what it means, because it's just mumbo jumbo to you. So you can easily tell the difference between a hypocrite and a true believer. And most Jews, Christians, and Muslims are hypocrites because they don't take it literally. They don't believe God really exists. They don't believe that there is an afterlife where good will be rewarded and evil punished. So even these Jews, Christians, and Muslims behave like atheists and nihilists. I guess they get a kick out of being Jewish or being Christian or being Muslim, but beyond the community that they found themselves in, because their parents were Jewish, or Christian or Muslim, that's all their religion means to them. It doesn't literally mean an afterlife. They probably think that nobody really knows, and they might as well stick with the religion of mum and dad, because if they didn't, there would be social punishment, such as mum and dad disinheriting them, their family and friendship circle ostracizing them, and that's it. That's all they care about, really. So, what is the state of mind of anyone claiming to be Christian? They would be typically, I would say, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, and racist, and wanting to hold on to their white middle-class identity, which they see Christianity as being a prop. They know that the lower orders don't go to church, which is why they are the way they are. And if you're an atheist, you would regard holding on to your socioeconomic status as more important than whether you get to heaven or not. And these people, but being anti-Semites, racists, Islamophobes, and snobs, would not be relishing the idea of hanging out with Muslims in mosques, even if they admit to themselves that Islam is easier to believe. And this is where secular Quranism comes in. I know they won't find it easy to make the transition, but they could easily form secular Quranist clubs where they can, well, these white people who could be Christian or atheist, they could at least get together under one umbrella to, talk about the book. And then, Hindus who are thinking of using secular Quranism with Indian characteristics to invite Pakistan to join India in to reunify with India. I mean, they could be, doing their, Pakistan Hindu secular Quranist book clubs, and so on and so forth. Anybody can form their own book clubs, and then they'll have a community to join without having to pretend to believe in nonsense. And Christians can do the same. They might think, well, if secular Quranism actually allows the religions of idolatry, of Buddhism and Hinduism and Christianity, then we should have no fear of secular Quranism, and perhaps we should all get together to study the book from which secular Quranism is derived, and form our own community that way. So that would be a way forward. But instead, all I get are not particularly helpful suggestions about being nicer to Christians. Christians are a basket case. They basically know they believe in nonsense, but they want to believe in nonsense. And those of them who are anti-Semites want to blame Jews, even though they know Jews are not to blame. They want to look down on Muslims because, well, they're brown, and they've just arrived, and, they are the people that the West kicks around. So they want to maintain their illusion of superiority over these fresh off the boat immigrants. And this is probably the operating factors in their mind in continuing to reject the most powerful being conceivable with the best available guide to humanity.